Egypt and the EU discussed the situation and ceasefire in Gaza. Egypt Foreign Minister urges de-escalation in Lebanon. And Ukrainian President Zelensky calls for a tougher pressure on Russia.
And then, of course, we have the host tonight, and I just want to thank you very much. It was a reason we chose Egypt, because you were very helpful, and very, very helpful. Everybody wanted to have this, but we really thought it was appropriate, and you are a great leader. And he's a fantastic man and a fantastic general, by the way. But he's a great president, and I want to thank Egypt and all of your representatives for treating us all so well. Thank you very much.
The news in detail. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati spoke with EU High Representative Kaya Kallas on a number of regional files, including Gaza. On Gaza, Abdulati stressed consolidating the Sharm el-Sheikh ceasefire, moving to phase 2 of President Trump's plan, political, developmental and humanitarian tracks, and hosting an international early recovery and reconstruction conference this month. He noted that the UN Security Council consultations on welcoming the plan, forming a peace council, deploying an international force, and a Palestinian administrative committee. Meanwhile, medical sources in Gaza say Israel handed over 15 bodies via the ICRC received at Nasser Medical Complex, bringing the total returned to 300. Hospitals report the latest transfer is the 11th batch of bodies returned through the International Committee of the Red Cross. With today's arrival at Nasser Medical Complex in Qnews, officials say 300 bodies have now been received, of which 89 have been identified. Medical staff and families say many remains show severe abuses and burning, complicating identification. Verification efforts are ongoing, and authorities are appealing for DNA matches to confirm names. The Palestinian Journalists Syndicate says dozens of armed Israeli colonists attacked reporters in Beita, south of Nablus, injuring 5 and destroying equipments. According to the syndicate, armed colonists stormed Beita and directly targeted journalists, covering events, firing live rounds, assaulting crews, and attempting to smash cameras in what it called a coordinated attack and a war crime. 5 journalists were injured, and medics treated them on site, with some sent for further evaluation. The body says this reflects an escalating pattern of violence against Palestinian journalists in areas of expanding colonist activities, adding it is working with the International Federation of Journalists and legal groups to seek protection and accountability. In the northern West Bank, Israeli forces dispersed marches in Kafr Qadum and Beit Lid, protesting settler land sieges amid a surge in settler attacks reported by the UN. Residents say troops moved in to break up demonstrations against settlers taking parts of Palestinian land near Kafr Qadum and Beit Lid. The UN reports attacks by the more than 500,000 Israeli settlers have sharply risen since the Gaza war began, declaring October 2025 the worst month for such violence since recorded started in 2006. Israeli forces said they were acting to maintain order as rights groups urged protection for Palestinians and accountability for offenders. Local sources say Israeli warplanes struck Gaza City and Khan Yunis early today with artillery fire east of the city in what they call another breach of the ceasefire. Strikes were reported in eastern Gaza City and eastern Khan Yunis alongside Israeli artillery shelling to the east of the southern city. No casualties were immediately reported, while at the same time residents said Israeli occupation forces continued demolishing residential buildings and structures east of this Gaza City. The United Nations says Israeli occupation forces carried out 264 attacks in the West Bank in October, the highest monthly figure in nearly 20 years. UN Deputy Spokesperson deaths, injuries or property damage, the worst monthly toll since records began nearly 2 decades ago. Since 2006, attacks total 6,900, with about 15% around 1,500 this year alone. The violence has displaced 3,200 Palestinians, destroyed livelihoods, and typically targets trees, vehicles, homes, and infrastructure. OCHA also logged 42 children killed in the West Bank in this year, about 1 in 5 Palestinian fatalities. For more analysis, we now move to Mark Summers in our newsroom. To you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Moni. Yes, so we're now joined from Cairo by the writer and political analyst, Mr. Ibrahim El-Darawi. Thank you very much for being here with us on Q News. So how durable would you say the current ceasefire is, given each side's incentives today? And are there particular triggers that could collapse it, cause problems for the ceasefire in the next 74 hours?
In the beginning, I'd like to confirm that Israel violates the ceasefire since the beginning. Israel violated the ceasefire every day. We've seen violations on a simple family from women and children were murdered today between the green area and the yellow area and the red area, and there were women and children seeking their homes. On the Israel side has a real crisis on not to abide by the ceasefire, and the U.S. we can say the U.S. when they said yesterday it will supervise the entrance of delivery, humanitarian aid delivery. Today, Israel said that they will decide what the aid will allow it. There is a conflict on which Israel is the decision maker on Gaza, or is it the U.S.? What happens right now is not what was agreed on between Hamas and Israel, and I think the upcoming period will witness some conflicts, and the stalkers in the red area and yellow area are not only Hamas but different Palestinian factions, and unfortunately there is gangs. We are talking about 5 or 6 separate gangs between the north and the south, and Rafah that is under the control of Israel. Therefore, does Israel want to explode the Gaza Strip before the final ceasefire agreement, as today they took the bodies, the deceased bodies, as the pretext, as if they are seeking the bodies through piles and piles of destructions. What helped in crystallizing the agreement is pressuring the U.S. in order to pressure the Israel to have an agreement and to allow the aid of delivery, and then apply what agreed on in Sharm el-Sheikh. And without pressuring the Israel, we will continue on 70, not only 72 hours, but 72 days. So it's very important to pressure Israel and pressure the U.S., we're saying that the resistant factions are stuck in the red zone. Israel doesn't want them to go out of the red zone, and if they get out, it will be of Israel benefit. And will cause losses on the sides of Israel if they get out of the zone. But Israel still doesn't want to complete the exchange of hostages or detainees agreement. There is still Benjamin Netanyahu still stalling. He still wants to go back to war.
Well, given what you were just saying there, what are the intra-Palestinian dynamics now? Of course, we have Hamas leadership, we've got the local governance actors and the Palestinian Authority. How do they shape who controls security, aid distribution, and of course the messaging that's coming out of those groups?
I think that Cairo exerted a lot of effort on the post-war day, and the second phase of the exchange detainees agreement. Israel is impeding the agreement. They don't want Palestinian authorities, they want international authorities. They think that international authorities will be like in power on Palestinians. They will be just of supervision. Therefore, I think Cairo has exerted a lot of effort in having a commission separate from the factions, supervising the Gaza Strip, and 40 figures were agreed on. 15 were be chosen. Out of 30 Palestinians will be supervised, and there's 5,000 soldiers were trained in Cairo, and maybe less in Jordan, a little bit less in Jordan, will enter Gaza Strip to control and to supervise the aid. And also Hamas agreed on surrendering their heavy weapons, and also the U.S. understood this issue as we're saying about the post-war day. If there is no control or supervision, we will find the gangs inside Gaza Strip that was left by Israel are the ones controlling and administrating Gaza Strip, and there will be no security or no stability for Israel or for Palestinians themselves. Therefore, the war will return. The Cairo put some restrictions for this, that Hamas will surrender their will surrender their the control authority to Gaza Strip will be administrated with the 9,000 soldiers trained in Jordan and Egypt, and with the group and the commission that may continue to rule it for 2 years. So the Palestinian Authority started to reform itself, and I think Cairo exerted a lot of effort to invite the Palestinian president to Cairo, and will not leave Palestine alone, and that was clear since October 7, 2023. And we are talking about a clear vision to Cairo and to mediators, but the Israeli administration is impeding this. Until now, the Israeli side is impeding the aid delivery and everything inside Gaza, and also impeding the response of the commission. We're talking today of that. Although the difference or between the Palestinians, but there is Palestinian consensus on this commission, even if the Palestinian Authority wants a minister leading this group. And I think Cairo can convince Fatah and the presidency to join, but the Israeli side doesn't want the participation of the Palestinian Authority, and this is what Cairo wants to do in the upcoming period.
Well, of course, that's Palestine. Let's now come to Israeli domestic politics. We've got coalition pressures. civil military posture, and also public opinion, of course. Do these different factors constrain or enable de-escalation steps that are affecting Gaza right now?
I think the intra-Israeli side are very controversial on what is going on in on Palestine. We're talking about intra-Israel. They are divided into extremists, and they attacked 30 villages of settlements. On the other side, or the other division, is opposing to Benjamin Netanyahu and Ben Gvir. I think Israel is burning from the inside, and I mean the word burning, because the Israeli side didn't, and Benjamin's government didn't achieve of what they announced on what with the hostages, the detainees didn't come back except with negotiations. The seized bodies didn't return except with negotiations. Therefore, all of these stuff, I think it's escalating from the extremist and the opposition, and also Benjamin Netanyahu. In the light of this time, it's unable to confront the world. The world today that was able to isolate Israel, isolate the U.S. Decision, the U.S. administration was able to take Israel off the tree of war, and now we've heard some declarations that may be strong today, but it will be in vain for the U.S. The U.S. Declared there is humanitarian violations in the Gaza Strip. It's not as what the criminal court has declared, but the U.S. wants to be present on the international and Arab arena, and also want to put to embark the embarrassment on Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. All of these things say that the U.S. didn't leave Israel alone and didn't leave Benjamin Netanyahu's government alone.
Okay.
That didn't allow.
Well, I think from what we've discussed so far, we can see that it's still a very difficult situation in Gaza and Palestine. But thank you very much for joining us. Sorry to cut you off there, Ibrahim El-Darawi, writer and political analyst, joining us from Cairo. Thank you very much. And now we go back to you, Mona, in the studio.
And thank you so much, Mark, for the analysis. And now turning to Lebanon, fresh Israeli air and drone strikes in the south have left casualties as the EU and UN press for restraint, and Egypt urges de-escalation under Resolution 1701.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Fresh Israeli strikes hit southern Lebanon today, with casualties reported as the EU urged Israel to respect the ceasefire amid rising border tensions. Local and agency reports say Israeli air and drone attacks struck areas around the south, with at least 2 fatalities and several injuries reported this morning. The EU called on Israel to halt actions that violate Resolution 1701 and last year's ceasefire, warning of further escalation if strikes continue. UN officials noted continued concern over border incidents as both sides trade accusations. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati spoke with Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, urging de-escalation in South Lebanon and reaffirming Lebanon's sovereignty and stability. In today's call, Abdulati rejected any infringement on Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity, stressing the need to lower tensions and prioritize calm to safeguard regional stability. He reiterated Egypt's firm support for Lebanon's unity, independent decision-making, and the state's authority across all its territory, backing national institutions to meet current security challenges and protect the Lebanese people. Both sides reviewed developments in the south and ongoing efforts to reduce escalation. Meanwhile, Israel said it struck two Hezbollah-linked operatives in the south today, part of ongoing operations against smuggling networks. The Israeli occupation military said the strikes targeted suspected weapons smuggling activities hours after additional flare-ups along the border. The announcement follows multiple raids this week that Beirut and UN officials say have strained the ceasefire. Seven people were injured when an Israeli drone struck near Salah Ghandour Hospital in Bint Jbeil today amid ongoing ceasefire violations. Lebanon's national news agency and health officials said two guided missiles hit a vehicle close to the hospital, wounding 7. It follows a string of raids in the south despite the ceasefire. Local reports also noted low-altitude drone activity over coastal areas earlier in the day as border incidents persist. Lebanese forces leader Samir Gaga criticized Hezbollah's latest message today, calling it built on fundamental misconceptions. Gaga said no faction can impose a singular national choice under threat of collapse, urging a broader consensus as security tensions and economic pressures persist. The remarks land amid fresh southern incidents and international calls to uphold the ceasefire. In eastern Chad, Sudanese refugees from El Fasher recount brutal abuses as UNHCR's Deputy Chief Kelly Clements urged continued international support for host communities and life-saving aid. At the Ora Kazoni camp near the Sudan border, refugees described beatings, sexual violence and killings during their flight from El Fasher. One survivor, Aisha Ismail Wazir, said many were assaulted and others did not make it. Visiting the site, UNHCR Deputy High Commissioner Kelly Clements called for sustained funding and protection measures, warning needs are outpacing resources as arrivals continue and pressure mounts on local services. Sudanese reactions were mixed after the RSF agreed to a U.S. Arab-backed humanitarian ceasefire and talks with hopes for return and safety set against doubts over the RSF's record of honoring truces. In Tawila and Omdurman, displaced families and residents voiced guarded optimism and skepticism as the RSF accepted a mediator proposal for a humanitarian pause and talks on ending hostilities. The army had yet to issue a formal response. The move follows the RSF's capture of famine-hit El Fasher, tightening its hold over Darfur. Mediators, backed by U.S. President Donald Trump's administration and Arab partners, are pressing for verifiable corridors, civilian protections, and a monitored timeline amid repeated ceasefire failures over the past 2.5 years. Tawila has become a refugee for families fleeing al-Fasher after its fall to the RSF, with UNHCR footage showing makeshift shelters as aid groups rush intense water and basic supplies. UNHCR video from Tawila shows rows of temporary shelters for those displaced by the RSF's capture of famine-stricken al-Fasher after an 18-month siege. Agencies report severe shortages and protection risks. Registration points are setting priority lanes for children, the elderly and the wounded as clinics scale up emergency care. The IOM estimates more than 60,000 people escaped al-Fasher in recent days, while large numbers remain unaccounted for. Local tallies suggest up to 200,000 may still be trapped. Humanitarians are calling for secure corridors, sustained food deliveries, and uninterrupted access to water and sanitation. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky urged tougher sanctions and pressure on Russia after overnight strikes killed civilians and hit energy sites, cutting power across Ukraine. Zelensky offered condolences after at least 3 people were killed in Dnipro and 1 in Kharkiv, saying weak response to Moscow's audacity only encouraged the war. Ukrainian reported overnight attacks on energy infrastructure triggered outages in multiple regions. Authorities are restoring supply while first responders clear debris and assess damages. Kiev is pressing partners for tighter sanctions and additional air defense support. At the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump said the war in Ukraine will end in the not-too-distant future as he hosted Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Trump offered no timeline or terms, but said he expects the conflict to conclude soon following talks with Hungarian leader Viktor Orban at the White House. The meeting covered regional security and war's broader impact. Kiev continues to press allies for air defense systems and sanctions enforcements, while European leaders warn that any settlement must uphold Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin, but before we wrap up, here is a recap of the top stories making headlines this hour. Egypt and the EU discuss the situation and ceasefire in Gaza. Egypt's foreign minister urges de-escalation in Lebanon. And Ukrainian President Zelensky calls for a tougher pressure on Russia. For more stories and live updates, please follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EGY. From all of us here, many thanks for watching and good night.